there's something absurd about what a large threat climate change is to the planet, and people are pretending or refusing to realize the threat. And we're going to get to talking more about climate threat, but there's something that it's almost like we need to take a couple of steps back and understanding what is it in this dichotomy, in this clash between those who want to protect the planet and those who don't give a damn. How is that even, what have we seen there that can bring wisdom into this discussion? And I was actually thinking about the shift that you have made, Adam, where you have gone from being on the very commercial side of real estate and development, and you have taken a very different turn in life that we of course would love to hear about. But also, what are your observations in that refusal to see each other's perspective on this very large and very urgent issue? Does that make sense to speak into that space?
Oh, most certainly. I think that's the most relevant thing out there today, other than we're confronting other challenges on the ground. But climate change is an existential threat. And so, first of all, thank you, Linda, for putting together this event and all this gathering. And it's so important at this time. And it's also wonderful to be here with your other guests today. So I'm grateful to be here with you all. And ultimately, one of the things I think about is, well, let's say a recovering Earth conqueror, having spent the better part of 3 decades as a serial entrepreneur and running business in the area of real estate development, investment banking. And as we know, there's nothing quite more intrusive on the land than development, and all that entails, and all the depletion of resources that brings. But it also, I think, speaks to really a paradigm that has run its course, a paradigm of business that really speaks to tapping and depleting those resources, and also to really creating greater carbon imprint on the planet. But when I look at existential threats like climate change, and it is the elephant in the living room. Let's just make no mistake about it. And business is starting to really tune into this as a threat to not only their companies, but also to their people and their resources of what really is their greatest assets. And so obviously we're here to create more movement and velocity for that attunement. But what is the meeting place for those of us that are really strong advocates for the planet, and those of us that are either conservationist or environmentalist? We hold the deeper indigenous wisdom of Mother Earth and whatnot. And I believe that meeting place is to offer and put forth ideas that really speak to the existential opportunity. So to really provide ideas that offer opportunity to create and innovate new models and new ways of doing business. And so I believe there are several ideas that are related to that. We can certainly dive more into that, but I want to give others the chance to speak in here. So business wants to attune into opportunity, and business is looking at new bottom lines and new top lines. So it's a very opportunistic time to explore what's next for Business 2.0, and how can we bring existential opportunity into the conversation as much as existential threats.
Thank you so much, Adam, and thank you for your openness and really setting the stage for this paradigm shift that needs to happen, but didn't have to happen in the first place. So something has been driving us that's really in the name of just progression and development where we have grown very, very blind to not thinking about Mother Earth as a resource rather as the very source of life that she is. Now, Chief Dwaine Perry, you are the chief of the Ramapough Lunaape Indians here in New York, New Jersey. And of course, you are carrying not only a lineage and extraordinary wisdom that has to do with the earth, you're also carrying a very heavy heart. And and understandably so. And for those of us who are tuning into this world right now, we feel that heaviness. And you have, of course, been an observant of this late paradigm and current paradigm, although we are coming up to a shift. It's still very much ruled by traditional forces of business, where such things such as greed and opportunistic development and a very disconnected idea of why we're even doing things. What would you like to bring into this space and the wisdom that you see from indigenous viewpoints, and also frustration that could possibly help us understand and help us see more clearly what should be coming next on the horizon?
Thank you. I think that if we step back a bit and perhaps use this next response as a springboard and a mediation point for some of the other challenges we faced. This particularly applies to this country we're in, but it's very easy to expound on. I believe that we should concretely get together and ask for a constitutional amendment to say that water is a human right, and that all rights that belong to human beings should be extended to water, just as an initial process, because truly without water, there will be no life. I don't think it would be that hard with the right affects to make this a constitutional amendment. So number one, that would set a legal stage and precedent for the entire country, if not the world. I'm sure many people at the UN would love to hear that. I think as we go forward from there, and like I said, a lot of it really, I think, hinges on legality. For instance, right now we're concerned about racism and et cetera, but the fact is, it particularly goes to more of the southern nations, like in South America and Africa, a great many benefits to the entire world has come from the pharmaceutical company. But how many of those have transferred is simply this: I go and set with your medicine people, I steal your intellectual property, I bring it to New York, I make billions. You never return $1 to the people that gave it to you, but you did manage to turn them into witch doctors with bones in their nose, or crazy people waving feathers at the sun all the time. So I'm saying the dichotomy there is, I think we can start out by making it very clear that there needs to be a moral sense and obligation to the people that we've taken it from. A respect. I get making money. I've solely responsible for never ever having any. I've probably walked away from a fortune a number of times. Because that's just who I am. It has nothing to do with money, but I'm saying there are, if you can't make a moral imperative out of making money and making self-worth an initiative, we're not going to make any headway. It's really that simple. People are not going to respect you. So I would suggest maybe we take a step back, figure out how to do a constitutional amendment, and then maybe even there how to maybe massage some of our pharmaceutical people around the world to say, maybe 1% out of all that you've made could be returned back to the forest so that the forest could be replenished. And we're not replenishing the forest, we're tearing them down. And I think everybody's aware right now we have a lot of relatives in South America and around that are actually being murdered for somebody else's dollar, probably maybe right on the street where we live. So just as an initial step, I think we should look at that. Because unless we do something concrete, the biggest failure, I think maybe Adam can speak to it, I think to this whole movement of Back to the Earth is that we've been framed as frivolous. So you really need business, you need their media output, you need that authority. Without that, we're just bumping our heads. You know, we're seeing a lot of that right now. So I would suggest that first we make it like I said, some form of legal amendment, and then we start to appreciate the people that we've actually stolen the intellectual property from. We've got to sort of undo the doctrine of discovery and say everyone has worth. And until we accept the fact, and I think until big business says everyone has worth, there's not going to be any forward motion. And that's what I'm thinking at the moment. And I'm honored to be with all you folks that spell better than I am and know how to turn on Zoom and things. I'm fascinated. Thank you.
I'm so impressed with you, Chief Perry. I'm so impressed. And I know that Adam wants to jump in, but I did want to just echo one thing that you were saying, that Owl from your tribe was saying the other day, that we're actually changing the preposition for water. It's not the right to water, it's the right of water. Right. That we are really looking at changing.
Right, and let me just thank you for that, because I was just speaking to Al saying I will bring this up, Al, and I didn't bring Al up, so sorry, Al.
Yes, Al is in the room for sure. I appreciate his wisdom and depth very much in all the Unity Earth calls that he is on and beyond, of course. But Adam, it seemed like you wanted to jump in. And
Oh, I'll just say a couple little things here, and thank you, Chief, for presencing the imperative of water, and I think it's inclusive of resources in general, but specifically to water. And what I have personally found in my own kind of evolutionary relationship with Earth, Mother Earth, and all her resources is just that, coming into a better relationship with these natural resources. So it becomes something that doesn't feel so good to pillage. And I'm not making an accusation here or pointing the finger in any way, but the idea of being in relationship, in all of our relationships, is really, I think, an invitation that we can offer to business and business leaders. And there are ways to do this, but one of the things that I'm a strong advocate is creating incentives for business to take certain actions. And in this particular case, as it relates to water, I would be a strong advocate of making simple revisions to how businesses keep their balance sheet, for example. And their balance sheets are very related to something. They have an item called goodwill. So let's have goodwill towards Mother Earth. Let's have goodwill towards water resources, where they can enhance their balance sheet by being water stewards, by becoming water keepers. And therefore, we're inviting business into a deeper relationship with water, and onboarding them into really what you've presenced that's so vital, is the protection of water and waterways and all things water. And so I'm a strong advocate, and I really like what you said, and thank you for mentioning that. And there's ways to do this that are seemingly pretty simple and straightforward, but maybe it's not as simple as it sounds. But a little tweak to gap financing could enhance goodwill in relationships with water and the earth.
Beautiful. Thank you, Adam, and thank you, Chief. I know that Rodrigo is, as a global marketing expert, you work a lot, not only in America, but with South America and all over the world. And I know that you have always had a very keen interest simultaneously for sustainability and for consciousness awareness. And when you hear what Chief Dwaine and Adam are speaking of in this space, what comes to your mind?
A number of different things. I mean, one, I appreciate being on the call. Thank you, Linda, and the knowledge being shared and articulated so well. I think that what, business has been for a number of different decades now, singularly focused on one bottom line, right? On the profitability of the stakeholders. And the system is designed that way, has been designed that way, right? Wall Street is about quarterly earnings and expectations and what that does to the organization, and then senior leadership is rewarded based on those meeting those expectations. So human behavior is a result of consequence or reward, right? And being Peruvian and growing up in Latin America, I'm very aware of global companies, which a few decades ago really meant American companies, going into different parts of the world and using those resources for the betterment of their bottom line. What I think is happening now, and I think that there's a lot of positives and not so positive around the social media aspect of organizations, the fragmentation of the media market. I mean, the uber fragmentation of the media market has moved people to these edges, right? Which goes into the politics of it all and so on. But what it also has given us is people are much more connected, right? And organizations move and behavior changes when there's a consequence to it not changing, right? And so with the Business Roundtable and with what Adam is talking about and the Chief is talking about, all very positive ideas and movements, organizations are going to adapt when they see their customers either demanding that they adapt or going somewhere else if someone else is adapting, right, quicker, right? And so the key is, how do you make those moves, right? And the media landscape has a lot to do with that, right? What they highlight, what they don't highlight. But I think that there is an awakening, for lack of a better term, because a little bit overused, but there is a significant awakening happening right now in this moment, with all of, from the pandemic to the current administration's lack of humanity and empathy, to racial injustices that have been festering for many decades in this country, to the lack of moral leadership of the United States, right? Which while never perfect, the world needs a moral leadership, right? They've counted on the United States to be that moral leadership. All of those things are kind of coming together with people being at home and having an opportunity to really look at this and say, like, no, I'm not going to shop there, or I'm not going to do that, or I'm going to be more simple, or I'm going to prioritize, understand the need for water and how that's connected to life. And there is this moment in time where business leaders, the good ones, will shift. How much they'll shift is a big question. And my fear is also, how much will we just revert back, right? Because as you were speaking about early, Linda, at the beginning of the conversation, is this battle between people that believe that climate change is a significant issue to be dealt with, and people that don't. And I don't know if it's that people don't believe that it's a significant issue as much as people are scared, right? There's either fear or love, right? Every decision can be down to fear or love. And people fear that a change or a tweak will affect them negatively, right? So I think Adam was mentioning that, how do you shift it's opportunity, right? Organizations and people look for opportunity to better themselves. And so I think that's sort of the conversation where I see it going, is how do you, from a marketing, communications and strategy standpoint, how do you make it beneficial for organizations and make it beneficial for them to move faster? Because I think they'll all move. It's just a matter of the quickness in which, the urgency of the moment, the urgency of now to move.
Thank you, Rodrigo. And it really speaks to the importance of overcoming this duality right now between the environment and making money. It's like, but this is not really where we should even be talking. There should be no dichotomy here, because the well-being of the planet has everything to do with the well-being of the people. We just happen to inhabit this planet. So there's something about so beautiful about what you're saying, Rodrigo, because it's only by overcoming this and start speaking into the space of no, but we're not saying that you're not supposed to be comfortable, or that you are not supposed to feel safe, or all these things that usually come up when we have these fear responses, right? So it's so much about finding those markers and that language, the message that makes people understand and really feel that no one is here to get them. Because what very often happens is that those who are the loudest on each side are the extremists. And so then you have those who are on the environmental side, completely against anything modern. And then you have those who really, really on the other side couldn't give a damn, and they want all regulations out the window, right?
Right.
And
So,
here's where we need to find that alternative.
so what happens is organizations and people in general won't do something until they're either forced, like, most people, doctors will tell you, people will not get in shape until the doctor says you will die if you don't do X, right? And so let's just take Apple, for example, right, as an organization here in Silicon Valley, right? Apple is moving they're doing a trade-in program now where you can bring in your laptop because, technology discarding iPhones and laptops is a big problem. Why haven't they done this for the last 20 years, right? Because they haven't had to, right? Because they haven't had to do it. And now there is this moment in time where, yes, the consumer is sort of wanting it to happen, but they see a benefit, and Adam talked about this very well, they see a benefit in moving that direction now. And it may cost them some money, but the cost reward is more significant. The reward they feel is more significant than the risk, right? The cost, the risk analysis. And the system is designed in a way that organizations are not incentivized to be progressive. They're incentivized to keep the status quo. And the chief mentioned this about the frivolousness of it, right? It's clearly the environment matters to the entire world, whether it's Apple or GE or anybody else, but they haven't been incentivized to care about it. They've been incentivized to do the opposite. So, with everything that's happening right now socially in this country in particular, I wrote something there things don't change until the people that aren't directly affected by something care as much or more than the people that are directly affected by it, right? So if suburban America, suburban white America begins to care about Black lives in earnest, you see the move. Until that happens, you won't make the move. There's a vacuum in leadership at the moment in making those moves, right? There's a vacuum in leadership and saying, I may not win the next election, but it doesn't matter. I'm still going to do it. We're missing that right now, right? Which is unfortunate. But yeah. What's going to replace that is that movement of that wave of people moving in that direction. Same thing has to happen with business.
It's so true. And I thank you for bringing up this larger perspective, because I wanted to bring in Virginia. Reverend Virginia, mind you, interfaith, interspiritual reverend, and also nationally very acclaimed astrologer. And I didn't want to talk about the planet without shifting the perspective from the planet and talk more about the planet from a planetary perspective, if you will. And Virginia has mentioned to me that there are a lot of companies that actually what do they do, Virginia? They hire, they seek the counsel of astrologers to understand what's going on?
Yes, human resources, human resource has astrologers. There's astrologers on movie sets and casting. I forget who was one of the famous financiers who said many years ago, if you want to, it's easy to make $1 million, but to make $1 billion, you need a good astrologer. So astrology, I mean, there are financial astrologers that working with Wall Street, and, astrology is everywhere, and it's more because of the internet, it's more accessible, and also because of the young people. 50%, they say, of millennials are obsessed with astrology, tarot, and, Wiccan, because they're not interested in organized religion. So, and that plus the internet and the exposure and of course, religion is having its own crises, so astrology is, more popular than ever. I just, all of you have such wisdom about the earth and about this subject. And I've learned something from each and every one of you. I do feel, I was thinking as I was listening, that the idea of fear, in terms of the companies, the people who make those decisions, and is there a way to communicate with them in a way that is not threatening, but to inspire them? Because it seems to me that this issue is more, I want to say popular, it sounds kind of cheesy, but the issue around water and the environment is more public and more embraced than ever before. And, so of course, how to work with companies and inspire them to become more committed to this. I don't have the answer, but one needs to, embrace them really, and not as the enemy, but, empower them, I think. It just seems to me, the issues around water, I mean, I see, and the environment is, I see little kids who are, who do this, and, the plastic issue, and it just so much more, honored, and yet we still have a problem, So, in terms of, I don't have any solutions, but, it just seems there are a lot of people who are very committed to this. There's still a problem, but more and more people, especially I see young, even little kids who, who are so committed to, not, recycling and, all this. But what I want to say about the astrology, for one thing, the planet Neptune that rules water. Neptune is the planet of the invisible and the unseen. And it rules anything like that you can't see with the naked eye: imagination, inspiration, music. Neptune rules the sign Pisces, and Neptune is in Pisces. Pisces is water. So when Neptune entered Pisces, I don't have the exact date, I think it was around the time of Katrina, the astrologers started calling it wounded water, issue of wounded water. Now, Pisces is at now, currently today, 20 degrees of, Neptune is at 20 degrees of Pisces, so the degrees only go up to 29. So this issue is growing, and it seems to me that in a few years, maybe 2 or 3 years, I don't have the ephemeris in front of me, Neptune will leave Pisces. And I think there will be more solutions and more businesses embracing this. Because as a planet leaves, it's done its work, to make the issue, to bring the issue up. Yeah, that's Neptune in Pisces. But right now, astrologically, this is an unprecedented time. And the astrologers have been talking for years about January 12th, 2020, not that particular day, but this whole January, February period, there will be a global crisis. And Saturn and Pluto, 2 heavy planets. The planets don't cause things. They expose what's already there. Like Pluto, the planet of death and rebirth, transformation, went into Capricorn 2008 and the market crashed. Pluto didn't cause that. it rules, it was in Capricorn, business, banking, and so forth, institutions. It exposed the lies and the corruption. So the planets are not up there trying to beat the crap out of us. They're trying to awaken us. And Saturn and Pluto came together in January, and they're traveling together now. This is an unprecedented time, and it's an intense, and when they came together on the 12th, and they only come together 3 times in a century, so it's a big deal. Saturn is hard and Pluto is deep and intense. But it's about change, and 2 days before there was a major eclipse and the planet Uranus, expect the unexpected, went direct. So it was like a perfect storm. And so what we're seeing this whole year and next year is a crisis. But, it can also be part of a master plan. People are waking up, not everybody. But I think this is a time where we're all, have to let go of all our issues, all our judgments, letting go of, dealing with our dark side, because America has a Pluto return. Never happened. Pluto takes 248 years to go all the way around and return to its original spot. And of course, America was born 1776, so you add that together, between 220 and 222, Pluto will return, and nobody knows what will happen, but this is an enormous amount of transformation. And, good, bad. Sometimes it has to get worse before it gets better, but it can't get better unless it gets worse, that old thing. But it is also a time of growth and transformation. I think I feel like we're all in recovery right now. In a sense, we're all taking inventory.
I feel that recovery, and for most certainly. But I feel very inspired. You said the word inspired, Virginia, and inspiring change.
Yes, I believe that. It's a reckoning. It's a reckoning, right?
Yeah, it's very relational. I'm sorry. It's very relational to what Rodrigo was presencing around what creates change within organization. And I definitely want to make a few thoughts on that and share a few ideas and insights on that. But also, Linda, thank you for presencing the idea that the wellness of Mother Earth and business, they're not mutual exclusive. They go together. We can work to create harmony. And our ancient ones and indigenous ones always knew they had no issue with abundance, so long as we're living in harmony with Earth and one another. So it's not like there's anything wrong with abundance. It's just how are we living in relationship with it. And one of the things that Rodrigo said and presenced a lot of great insight, but I would challenge a bit as really kind of a paradigm that does not work, is a fear-driven, force change psychology. Now, while that's true, I sense that what is the imperative now to kind of get the evolutionary leap that business is really asking for is to put forth inspired change with ideas that are constructively create a bigger, more robust balance sheet and a bigger, more robust bottom line for stakeholders. And the idea that business as we know does not do well with the unknown. They do not do well with fear. And this is when business actually freezes up. We've seen policy that's created this. We've seen certain conditions on the ground, be they trade and conditions that it's obviously very relevant right now with what's happening with trade around the globe. So it creates an uncertainty and an unknown, and business freezes. They don't invest in research and development. They don't invest in other ways. So the idea of inspired change, incentivize inspired change with a little nudge, of course, from the reality on the ground. People are thinking, they're operating differently. They want to work in their workplace differently. Many companies are experiencing other types of trade issues and other issues, but to create policy that's effectively inspires that change, I think is really key, and not to focus simply on what is it that we got to force companies into. I think we all know getting forced into something, or interpersonal change, for example, is awfully painful and can be very, very confusing and also very destructive. And that's not what we're focused on. And
If I might, I think perhaps a very basic thing that we've overridden here that's changed in the last 25 years is education. There used to be civics, there used to be some teaching of self-worth. We've done a paradigm change from self-worth to how much can you make. For instance, now the media is loaded with, look at my home that 99% of the people will never obtain, but there's nothing really great about somebody living in that studio in Manhattan that's absolutely gorgeous, has got a wonderful life. We're not highlighting the value of ourselves. And I think one of the things we need to do, since business also runs on education and like you said, the technology and et cetera, we need to reevaluate what are we doing with education? Are we teaching our children that human beings have worth? Or are we teaching them that if you don't have money, you don't count? As long as we're sort of discounting people with a value, with a monetary value, we're not going to have a better society. And we're never going to have 90% of the people are extraordinarily wealthy. There's nothing wrong with wealth, but if now it almost looks like our team and your team, which is ridiculous because overall there's only one team. So I would just suggest that maybe we should look at how we're going about educating our kids these days, that we should get back to a little more humanist approach to it.
Thank you, Chief, for presencing the importance of education. And it also goes very much in line with what Virginia is expressing with younger kids and all the way up through millennials, having really shifted their interest point from very dusty and rusty old paradigms to new ways of looking at life, which comes back to your point, Chief, which has to do with value. And thank you. That was very, very heartfelt. And I think that we all resonate with that. And what I'm curious about also, Chief, is when you hear this inspired change for business, is there a part of you that feels like we've been pretty darn patient for a long time and we do need more radical change? Or do you see that a more coming together and inspiring shift is more, or approach is more appropriate? How do you feel from where you're at?
I think if we actually honestly start to dialogue with people that have basically the fiscal authority to make change, once they find a comfort level, they're the ones that will make radical change radically. I mean, I'm sure all of us have sat around with a number of people and basically, excuse the expression, but they're airheads. And then when they really found out what's going on, they went like, oh, really? But they're also the ones that have the wherewithal to make the change. So I think maybe expanding our dialogue like you guys have been doing, and maybe situationally, so that there is a comfort level. And it's also important to know, little example happened to me recently. I was standing in the mountain and there were some people there that had maybe a 2-bedroom house and they were overjoyed. They thought, how nice this guy come. And then the guy started looking at power views and all of a sudden he was like, well, then you don't need to be here. And that was the attitude. And it was like, he was the one that brought the change. He's got the power to sit there and destroy the mountain, build the house, look all magnificent. But he didn't have any heart at all to him. And so it wasn't like this group was mad at him. They were going. So I think there has to be a dialogue going on so that everyone is viewed to have value. And I believe when you're born, the only value we have is our mothers.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And it also encourages the next step of this project, the Becoming of Business, where we are leaning a little bit more now in round one towards the spiritual wisdom, consciousness type platform, Whereas as we grow in this becoming of business, we are inviting more and more of the very people in power positions that you were talking about, who can, with these insights and with this shift of heart, really make a really great impact. So thank you for encouraging that direction.
If I might add one other comment, this is not a commercial. I've recently been working with some people in OWL again to put together the first embassy of the Western Hemisphere for indigenous sovereign people. And the idea behind that was to give our folks that have no voice a voice. And so that's all about exactly what we're talking about. And also a part of the embassy is that there are spiritual leaders globally that somehow with an understanding, they really do affect health and dimensions and understanding. And I think if we could provide, once again in history, a safe place for these people to come together, we can share that wisdom globally. And right now, I think we've driven a lot of what we call medicine people into hiding because they become witch doctors, they become some kind of crazy Indians or in the forest. So we're looking to provide a safe space for them, but I think that's also a part of the solution, is to be able to bring these people to where they were maybe 2,000 years ago. They were leading all of our people forward. Now they're hiding. So anyway, I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Chief, you mentioned something really, I think, very relevant about radical change. And obviously radical throws business for a loop. But I think you present something that I think is really the new era of business and innovators that are creating new models as we go forward that are transcendent of old models. And that is, and I just want to opine on it a bit and emphasize it a bit more, because they are the disruptors, and they are willing to go very big to disrupt once they can onboard themselves into an ideal, a product, a technology. So I think that could be certainly be applicable of education, creating educational resources for the people that work for their company, but more importantly, not just the people that work for their company, but their families and their children that work with these companies. So I really feel that you really present something very important to know, that it's okay to be a radical disruptor, a radical innovator, that you won't get shot down by your company, and to create environments within these companies that allow for this to happen, to support this type of dialogue and this open space for HR and other people to come into these radical changes, because we really do need great radical change. And maybe some of you, I'll just put it out, and Linda, you yes or no, but maybe some of you have kind of what specifically needs to radically change. In other words, is there's one thing that will precipitate great change within an organization. And obviously that one thing may be, well, the leader of the organization, but some of you may have other ideas. So I'll cede the floor to that discussion if we choose or not.
What I'm hearing between this, in the space of this, is that it may not be so much about asking, it might go too far to ask everybody to make peace with the planet and find the inner peace to create that peace with the planet. Rather, and what I'm hearing is that there is this meaningful relationship that we need to get to. And that in that meaningful relationship, that can also mean something to businesses. Because again, all business really is people. It's made out of people. So what do you say, Rodrigo, in response to this meaningful relationship, or anything else that's been talked about here that you would like to leave as an imprint with your big wisdom?
Well, I don't know about that, but I think that, it does come down to humanity and relationships, right? I mean, all businesses as people in a relation, in a financial relationship and a human relationship with a common goal, right? And so there are businesses out there, Airbnb and some others, that are taking a more human approach to dealing with both their customers and their employees, even in difficult times. Showing much more empathy, much more a much kinder way than say a generation ago. And I think that's both, to Adam's point, right? There's fear, but there's also a benefit to that. And I think for all of us that are involved in this, the idea is to highlight the folks that are doing it right, the folks that are doing it, that are being human about it, that see the incentive of treating the planet better, and then let the paradigm shift in that direction, so that those folks and those organizations are the ones that are getting those disruptors, those innovators, transformers are the ones that are being highlighted in the larger scope of the media market, because that's what everybody listens to, and even Wall Street. And those folks are, and then other organizations want to either follow that because the customer base is starting to move in that direction. And I think all of that is happening, right? I think if you look closely, if you take a moment in time, these shifts are happening, and these, recession, a pandemic, social unrest, what they do is they accelerate things that were already in occurrence, right? And so both good and bad. And I think we are in that moment where that shift is occurring. I mean, I'm certainly a much more empathetic human leader in my organization, in my pocket of jurisdiction that I have, right? Be it global or regional. And then people yearn for that, right? And then executives, to the chief's point, the people that have the capital to make the moves, the good ones, the progressive ones, will note that and then drive that forward, right, for the betterment of their organization. We go into organizations out here on the West Coast in Silicon Valley to pitch new business, and the diversity inside those rooms is much further ahead than you would think that the media has you believe, right? Not in all organizations, but in some more progressive ones, I won't name them, but in some more progressive ones, the diversity is moved, because the education in the last 20 years has moved in that direction and moved people more diverse. So it is occurring, right? You just have to look at it and then highlight it, and it will never occur as fast as we want it to, but I think it is beginning to take shape. I mean, I'll leave you with one last thing, right? The millennial generation is 80 million strong, right? Which is twice the size of Generation X, and 20 million bigger than the baby boomers. So whatever that generation decides to move, the market is going to move with them, right? Or they're going to move the market. And there's a lot of really positive things in that generation, moving away from materialism, moving into more experiences, moving into simpler lifestyles, moving into, to the chief's point, respecting human life and respecting others for who they are versus what they have, right? And I think that that shift is happening, in my own humble, positive opinion.
How beautiful. Thank you. Yes. Yes. And this is the balance that we are looking at, do we push and shove? Do we tiptoe? Or what is this beautiful gray area in between where we have many, many choices? And as any conflict expert will tell you, collaboration always wins. And with that, I'm hoping, Chief, that your initiative can live in a meaningful way side by side with the becoming of business, because there will be players in this space that will be important for the vision of what you are creating. So we'll definitely keep a big eye on that and see where that can take us.
I want to say thank you all. It's been wonderful to be here in this most noble endeavor for business. And yes to peace within our organizations. May our business find within their culture a deep inner peace, a great balance of all that they're doing, because ultimately we know that therein lies peace within an organization. Are they balanced? Are they whole? Are they in relationship with Earth? And I think those are great questions for business leaders today, so they can, well, let me just say, peer into the soul of their mission and peer into the soul of their people to hold peace on Earth and to really steward Earth in a new way. And that's my concluding thought. It's been wonderful to be here with everyone.